Hi doll friends, I'm here to talk to you and share some other wonderful dolls with you. I try to, every time I do one of these videos, I find myself trying to find things that perhaps you haven't seen before or that we can do some different perspective on. And in our upcoming auction in just a week and a half away, called Dance of the Hours, I have two of the highlight dolls. These are both from the Lillian Ham collection, and they are, even though they're made within 5 years of each other at the beginning of the 1900s, they represent two entirely different points of view in doll making. So let's talk about them and see where we can go from here, both of them with absolutely wonderful stories. About 1917, a New England couple, the Schultzes, traveled to Paris, and there was at that time, as there always is in Paris, wonderful exhibitions going on of various items. There was an exhibition at that time that would come under the general theme of Renaissance of the French doll. And in it, the French doll makers and the fashion industry were trying to revive their flagging fashion and doll industries that after World War I. It was a very, very difficult time. To that regard, what the doll makers did was enlist the attention of some of the famous Parisian sculptors and painters from the time and ask them if they could sculpt a model of a doll. A few of them participated in this, such as Van Rosen, such as Marquise Pulbeau, and most notably, Albert Marque. Interestingly, these artists really only sculpted one. Van Rosen, I believe, has 2 or 3 models. Pulbeau only did 1 model of a doll, and Marque only did 1 model of a doll, his very, very famous doll simply known as the Marque, M-A-R-Q-U-E, named for him, the artist. And if you do research on the internet, you can go in and find lots of fabulous information about him as an artist, both a painter and a sculptor. At any rate, he decided to participate in this movement of creating a doll for the French industry. And he created this extraordinary model, totally different than anything before, and significantly so many different features about it, like the 4-part mold, not just a classic doll face and back of head put together, but this one, a 4-part mold, which allowed to get much more angular features. And let me turn it so you can see the profile, and you can see the very defined temple. Absolutely wonderful. This very, very, wistful look, like dreaming of times past. Remember, this is just post-World War I. Very, very sad time in Paris as well as everywhere, but particularly in Paris, since so much had been destroyed. To that end, a special body was created for the doll that was the body of like a child just perhaps entering teenage years. Long, slender torso, but very muscular, very strong, a beautifully defined fit piece, and specially modeled bisque hands. The doll was made, and to our knowledge, to our present knowledge in the doll world, there were only 100 models, 100 examples of the Marque doll made. Most of them are numbered. This one is number 4, and I particularly call attention to that because when I first mentioned that it was coming up for auction, I said it's number 8. I said it was number 48. And when I went to catalog it and really studied it, I realized that the ink script on the back of the head indicating which number it was in the series didn't say 48. It said the symbol for number and then 8. And if you look in the catalog later, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. So at any rate, this was number 8 from the series. Well, going back to my story, the Schultzes went to Paris at the time, about 1915, 16, 17, we don't know exactly when. And as one of their things, they visited a special exhibition that was going on at the boutique of Marque Lacroix, who was a fashion person, mainly a corsetier in Paris, who was doing a display of dolls dressed in fashionable costumes of the time, historic costumes of famous queens of France, and significantly, costumes representing the Ballet Russe, which was then sweeping Paris. I mean, it was the big thing in the cultural scene of Paris, the Ballet Russe. And some of the dolls that she exhibited there with costumes made by her studios were costumes from the Ballet Russe. This particular one we have pretty much documented because it appears to be from the opera Scheherazade, which was then touring Paris again, and very, very similar to the costume work that was being done for the Ballet Russe by Leon Baps. And this is very symbolic of his work. I wanted to share this with you because the couple, Schultzes, bought two of the dolls from that exhibit, both wearing costumes representing the Ballet Russe theatrical performances, brought them back to America, and some years later, the couple's son, Arthur, and his wife opened in Florida the Museum of Old Dolls and Toys in Winter Haven, Florida, where this doll and a companion were exhibited side by side for a number of years until they were sold mostly by Theriault at auction, but the pair of Marques were sold privately to Lillian Hamm at that time and have remained in her collection ever since. We sold this partner several years ago for Lillian, and now this is the companion that goes with it, and here is the postcard that shows how they were exhibited in the museum all those many, many years. I'd like you to look at the detail of the costume because it's so hard to show in the photograph, and even until I actually went to catalog it, I wasn't aware of how extraordinary this fabric was, the way it's woven. I just don't think you could get this kind of fabric anymore. It's so very, very fine, with the little matching ballet slippers and the symbol on the bottom of the slippers, the symbol of the full figure of a doll, which were the shoes that were used for the costuming of the Albert Marque dolls. And obviously these slippers they were leather, still have the leather soles, and you can see a little piece of the leather peeking out beneath. And they had silk slippers made to cover them, which matched the tunic that was underneath. And then this extraordinary brocade jacket, all of the gold beading, which extends down the front, along the perimeter of the sleeves, and the matching turban, again with that metallic fabric, which is absolutely wonderful. So we have this wonderful doll to offer of the Marque from the Marque and Lacroix exhibition originally. Full documentation, only ever been in the hands of the Schultz family at the Museum of Old Dolls and Toys, and then Lillian Hamm, until one of you will have a chance to help this doll continue on its journey. It's a fabulous, fabulous piece. I'm excited about it. You can tell I can't stop talking. But I'm equally excited about this doll from the Lillian Hamm collection. And if I were a collector, I would be hard put, which one do I want to choose? Well, I want them both, let's face it. And this one is the model 103. It's a great, great story. So many things about this, made by the Cameron Reinhardt Company. And those of you who do not have this book, German Doll Studies, which are the English translations of the articles that were originally published in that fabulous German magazine, which is now no longer, of the antique German dolls, a study by the Sieslicks on the beginning of the German doll industry, in which this particular doll is mentioned and the wonderful discovery that they made. This is model 103. Supposedly it existed, but nobody really knew about it. It didn't make sense because when people collected the 100 series from Cameron Reinhardt, there was the 100 and the 101, and you might find a 102, but 103, 104, 105, no one had ever seen them. So the Sieslicks were curious about this, but they were also curious about what was the origin of this series of art character dolls. This expressive face is so incredibly achieved, not only in, as many of the art characters are, in the sculpting itself with the deeply set painted eyes, the expression of the mouth, the turning of the nose, the philtrum above the lips. Look at the hollows around the sides of the eyes, achieving that. But in this particular case, the painting is exquisite, which did not happen on many of them. Now, one of the reasons for this is, I ask you to pay attention, size. Many of the Cameron Reinhardt art character series, the 101, the 114, were made in a variety of sizes. And I'll show you an example well, in just a minute I'll show you another example, were made in a variety of sizes, not the 103 and 104, one size only, this particular size. So the Cieslicks kept wanting to find out who sculpted these wonderful dolls. And one day, there was no mention of it anywhere in the company records, except in the anniversary booklet that Cameron Reinhardt did in the 1920s, in which they mentioned this famous German sculptor who had modeled their dolls, but no mention of what was his name, who was he? And then, somewhat later, and if I could read to you from the article that they published, tell you more. I was so excited, and I've talked to them about this so many, many times. All right, in 1984, a young woman from Berlin wrote a paper for an exam on Professor Lewin Funk, as the artist, not the doll maker, understand. He was an art scholar. The Funk family had helped her and had studied each document, each hint relating to his works, but nothing had been mentioned regarding dolls, not even the handwritten register of his works, where Lewin Funk took note of the sculptures he made and the price he got for them. The Cieslicks, we're so indebted to them for the research they did on German dolls. Nothing until they came along had ever been done in that depth, and nothing since. We were the first ones to see the significance of the entry in, quote, Laughing Boy, 6 months, 1908. That was, of course, a reference to the Cameron Reinhardt 100 model. And then they talked to the family about this, and they showed the family that baby. And the family said, oh, we have a sculpture in the house that my father did, or my grandfather, that was the very same thing. And the clue had been made. Lewin Funk was the sculptor of the original model, the original doll from the 100 series. Well, then they went on and they studied some more, and as time went on, and even more information that came to light after they published this article was that they finally were able to determine that Lewin Funk himself had sculpted this model after his young daughter, Karen Lewin Funk. And so we now have the complete history. And so we have two dolls, both of them made by the hands, or modeled by the hands of famous artists of their time, Albert Marque in Paris and Professor Lewin Funk in Berlin. And I think this is so extraordinary because I love tying dolls into the art world and showing how important dolls are in the whole history of not only our popular culture, but in the art world itself. So we've only had one other example of the 103 that we've sold in all of our 50 years, this being our 50th anniversary year. I got to put that little comment in. This is only the second one we have ever sold. The first one was when we sold the Legoland Museum of Dolls and Toys. There were made in one size only, and it was, as I've described it in the catalog, they made a reference to it in their catalog description. They learned that the model for the 103, 104, 105, the Cieslicks, the model was Karen Lewin Funk, the daughter of the sculptor, and an old handwritten note from Cameron Reinhardt described the 103 mold as girl serious. I love that. The doll was acquired by Lillian Ham in the early 1980s from a private collector, original family owners, and has been in her collection ever since. So here we have Girl Serious, made in the one size only. So two important dolls in this upcoming auction. I'm going to show you some more wonderful ones now.